Okay, so I want to show a couple of these examples here, and if you take a look at this particular rhythm, this one happens to be a 6-second strip. You've got the marks up top here. So I have a little hash mark there at the beginning, got one in the middle, got one at the end. So there's a 6-second strip. Now, I want you to walk your way through this. Take a look at the QRS. Is the QRS wide or narrow? And I'm going to ask you at each one of these junctions, feel free to pause the video so that you can figure out your answer first, and then I'll just jump right in and go ahead and answer it. So first off, determine, is the QRS wide or is it narrow? Go ahead and pause and determine your answer and then come back. Okay, well the QRS here is only about one block wide, one small block wide, so it's certainly narrow. How about the P waves? Do I have P waves present? And if so, can you describe them? Go ahead and pause. Okay, the P waves here are present, they're upright, they're round, and they're symmetric all the way across here. So P waves are round, upright, and symmetric. Next would be checking the PR ratio. Do I have an even match of P waves and QRSs? Go ahead and pause the video. The PR interval, the PR ratio here is 1 to 1. Every time I have a P wave, I have a QRS with it. Every time I have a QRS, I have a P wave with it. How about the PR interval? Take a look at the PR interval here, and you need to kind of look closely on here. A couple of judgment things that you can use. Remember that the large blocks are 5 blocks wide. So go ahead and pause the video and determine the PR interval. Okay, well if you look, the PR interval stays essentially consistent. It's the same distance each time, and these P waves are crammed right on top of the QRS. If you look at this one in particular, it's about a 1.5 block interval, not quite 2 blocks. So that's a shorter than normal PR interval. That's late P waves. The P waves are pretty much right on top of the QRSs here. How about looking at the R to R interval? Go ahead and pause the video. Well, the R to R, this is a computer-generated image, so these are all equally spaced. That's a regular R to R interval. Go ahead and count your rate real quick. Pause. All right, and if you come back, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and there's kind of a half a beat here. So, well, do we count that or do we not count that? If you remember, if you see one at the very beginning and one at the very end, count one but not both. Well, I only see the one at the end. So honestly, I'd be okay. There's 7 full beats on here if you called it a rate of 70. I'd be okay if you counted this beat and called it a rate of 80. And in reality, it's probably somewhere kind of in the middle. It's going to be a rate of about 75 or so. But if we go by the rules, QRS is narrow, P waves are upright, round, and symmetric. The PR ratio is 1 to 1. PR interval is too short. The P waves are late. The R to R is regular, and the rate is 75 or 70 or 80. We've hit all the characteristics here except the PR interval is too short. And if you remember, the PR intervals being too short or the P waves being late is an indication of a junctional rhythm. So junctional rhythm, it's not just junctional rhythm though, with a rate of 70 something, it's not in the normal range for the junction, and it's not all the way up to tachycardia, so this would be an accelerated junctional rhythm. Alright, we're over to a new rhythm here, and I'd like you to take a look at this. Go ahead and walk your way through the characteristics here real quick. I'll walk you through what things to measure. Feel free to pause on each one as you need it. Take a look at the QRS. Is it wide or narrow? Pause. Look for the P waves. If they're there, describe them. Go ahead and pause. Look for the PR ratio. Is it equal match or something else? Go ahead and pause. Look for the PR interval. Go ahead and pause. Look for the R to R interval. Go ahead and pause. And this is a 6-second strip, so determine what's your rate. Go ahead and pause. Alright, so let's walk through those. The QRS, is it wide or narrow? Well, this looks a little wider than some of the things that we've seen, especially with the drawings, but it's still pretty narrow. And actually, if you look, it's about 2 blocks wide, 2 small blocks wide. Another way you can determine, because it might be a little hard depending on what kind of screen you're looking at this, if you can see the individual small blocks, great. If you can't, you should be able to, at the very least, see the large lines. And if you look at the large lines, so if I were to trace a box like this, here I'm going to kind of do it a little off-centered here so that it works. If that was essentially a 5 by 5 block, that's going to be one large block. And a large block is 5 small blocks. So if I do the math on that, half of 5 is 2.5. Well, 3 is more than a half of a large block wide. So essentially, as long as your QRS is no more than half of a large block wide, and it can even be a little bit more than half of a large block wide, then it's a narrow QRS. So you can look at this, and even looking at this at low resolution, you can tell that that's like right on the line, and that's nowhere near half of a large block. So that's a narrow QRS. Narrow QRSs, there's no P waves here, so you don't have to describe them. There's just no P waves. PR ratio is that I have more QRSs than I have P waves on here. The PR interval is unable to obtain. You don't have any way that you can determine what the PR interval here. And the R to R is regular, so the R to R distance is the same. I've only got two gaps in here, but if I even count blocks here, that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 large blocks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 large blocks. So it's the same distance between those. I have a regular R to R. Well, it can't be a sinus rhythm because it's got no P waves on here, so there's no atrial activity. And I've explained it's a narrow QRS, so it had to start above the ventricles. It's a junctional rhythm. And with the rate being 30, that's actually less than what we would expect the junction to fire. So this would be a junctional bradycardia. Okay, we're going to look at one last one, and I'm going to let you go ahead and figure out all the components by yourself. So you should know now what rules and what things you're looking at. So go ahead and pause the video and analyze this rhythm, and I'll be back with you when you're ready. Alright, well, if you look, this is honestly abnormally narrow QRS, but it is a narrow QRS. It's like less than a small block wide, and I get criticized with my computer program that these are a little bit too narrow, but nonetheless, it is a narrow QRS. The P waves on here are upside down. They're inverted. So if you look, there's one P wave, there's another, there's another, there's another, there's another. So I've got P waves are inverted on here. And the PR ratio is 1 to 1, so I have equal matches between there. And make sure you're answering every question when you see this on the test. If you leave it blank, it might not apply or it might not really matter, but if you leave it blank, then you lose the point on there. So one of the caveats on here is you have to answer both pieces on here. And so the PR ratio is still 1 to 1. The PR interval in this case is about 2.5 blocks or so. So it's a little bit short, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. The fact that it's inverted already tells us what we have. But I have PR interval here is about 2.5 small blocks. And then the R to R looks nice and regular. Now if I count this out, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Heart rate would be 130, and inverted P waves with narrow QRS indicates that this is a junctional rhythm. The rate being 130, it's junctional tachycardia. Go ahead and practice the strips that are in your book, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email and take your quiz once you get done with looking over the ventricular rhythm video here as well.